Hi everyone joining us today. Thanks for tuning in to How FoodTech Ensures Our Food Security Beyond COVID-19, presented by SGInnovate and General Assembly in support of Deep Tech for Good. I'm Cheng from SGInnovate, and we are a government-owned organization that invests in and helps build deep tech startups that leverage science and technology to make lives better for all. A big part of our work is to build a global community of leaders and doers who are driving deep tech innovations such as AI, cybersecurity, medtech, quantum tech in our economy and society. Today, we are very excited to learn how food tech will change the way we eat for the better through embracing alternative proteins. We will first start with a presentation by Dr. Jun Cheng, a specialist team lead from the National Center for Food Science, who will be sharing on Singapore Food Agency's regulation for alternative proteins. This will be followed by a panel discussion moderated by Dr. Dala Algawas, where we will hear more from Hon Moon from Turtle Tree, Dr. Ling of Shok Meats, and Surup of Eat Just Asia on their insights into the agri-food industry. We would like this to be an interactive session, so if you have any questions, do post them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and do use the chat box function to connect with our wider community. Now, let me just hand over the time to Hongwu of General Assembly to share more about GA. Hongwu, please.
All right, thank you, Ting, and hello to everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this session. So my name is Hu, and I'm the Marketing Manager for General Assembly Singapore. So just in case this is your very first time hearing of GA, we are a global tech education company, and we really focus on helping people to reskill and upskill themselves in the most in-demand tech fields. So, be it coding, data, design, digital marketing, or product management. But also a bigger part of what we do here at GA is also to make sure that, we bring to our community events topics that are very, very much of interest to the wider community, and food tech is definitely one of them. So I'm sure you have all seen very alternative proteins and different kind of approaches to protein popping up in the markets, in the supermarkets around you. So I'm sure this is a topic that's of interest to a lot of people. So we are very excited to be able to work with SGInnovate on this event and bring you such an amazing panel of speakers today who will share with you, what's happening for this industry and what's next. And I will pass over the time back to Ting.
Thank you so much, Hongwu. So now let me introduce Dr. Jun Cheng. He's who will be sharing on the Singapore Food Agency regulation for alternative protein. He's the specialist team lead for the National Center for Food Science. So Dr. Would you like to bring up your slides?
Hello, good morning, everybody. So can you all see my slides?
Yes, we can see them clearly. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So thank you, SGInnovate, for inviting me to this virtual forum, and also Ting for the very kind introduction. So I believe many of you in the audience are from the food tech startups and will be looking at bringing innovative food products to the market at some point in time. So the question of regulations will definitely come to mind. So today I'm actually just sharing a snapshot on this topic. Right, I'm not sure if so I believe most of the audience here are from Singapore, but just a very quick introduction of SFA, just for the benefit of some of these participants who are not from Singapore. So we are actually a very relatively young agency. We just crossed our second anniversary for about 4 months ago, and really the formation of the Singapore Food Agency is to sharpen the focus on food security and safety. Right, the agency was formed combining most of the food-related resources and capabilities into a single agency so that we have oversight from farm to fork. So we are now a statutory board under also the renamed Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment, together with our sister agencies, the Water Agency PUB and the National Environment Agency. All right, so to ensure that Singapore has a supply of safe food, the Singapore Food Agency has developed the Singapore Food Story, which comprises of 3 stories termed the 3 food baskets. Our first food basket is to diversify import sources, and with many competing users of land in Singapore, we do rely heavily on food imports, and we must certainly diversify our sources to ensure that our food supply is resilient to global food supply fluctuations. right? So you can see the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic further demonstrates that how vulnerable our global food supply chain is to any form of disruptions and the need to be prepared for it. So the second food basket is to grow locally. We want to build local capabilities to produce more food for Singapore in times of need. Right, I will elaborate more on our 30 by 30 goal in the next slide, but the idea is that given our land scarce situation, we envision a lot of science and tech to drive productivity along this strategy. So the third food basket is growing food overseas. We are supporting homegrown companies to make headway overseas, where they're able to actually overcome manpower and land constraints. So therefore bringing down the cost and reducing the price of food exported back to Singapore. So in 2019, as we formed the Singapore Food Agency, we also announced our ambitious goal to produce 30% of our nutritional needs locally by 2030. So this so-called 30 by 30 goal is to be met within our land constraints, where currently less than 1% of the land is designated only for agriculture use. So it's very challenging. So apart from providing a buffer on food supply, so local production can also mitigate the impact of climate change and resource constraints. So I emphasize again, we are talking about nutritional needs over here. So we have used the Singapore Health Promotion Board's Healthy Plate to help communicate this goal, which we find it easier for the public to understand. So for those of you who are also from the industry, you'll also be able to appreciate the flexibility of this approach. Because for example, various forms of protein production will also contribute to the protein group. Yep. So to achieve the 30 by 30 goal, technology will be the key enabler. We have developed a comprehensive research and development program, and the Singapore government is committed to implement this by having allocated $144 million. This research and development program covers three broad themes. So the first theme is the sustainable and urban food production, where we hope to increase productivity and lower the resources needed through advances in genetics, nutrition, and disease and health management. So the second theme is advanced biotech-based protein production to develop novel biotech-based food production methods. So this actually includes research in alternative proteins, which is the title of my talk today, right? So and all of this will be predicated on food safety, and hence we have this third theme on food safety, science and innovation, looking into research that can address emerging challenges in food safety, in support of the first two themes that I mentioned. Right, so collectively, this will actually help us achieve Singapore's 30 by 30 goal through increasing food productivity, developing technologies for alternative protein production, while also not forgetting to enhance food safety capabilities within Singapore's ecosystem in response to these emerging challenges. Okay, so I mentioned alternative proteins. So how we define alternative proteins in SFA is that these are proteins coming from anything other than traditional livestock. So the ones that the public would be more familiar with would certainly be things like plant-based proteins, which a lot of it are the usual mock meat that our vegetarian friends consume. So microprotein. So the most well-known example is it's probably the corn brand products, right? And then algae protein. So this is actually quite commonly derived from things like spirulina, which is consumed as a health product. So the newer entries into into the Singapore market for this category are probably insect proteins, although insect is actually not new in some countries like Thailand. And finally also cultured meat, which can go by many names like cell-based meat, cultivated meat, etc., right, depending on which part of the world you live in. Right, so amongst these alternative proteins, right, SFA does distinguish them on whether they are novel foods. So SFA's approach to novel foods is based on whether these foods have a history of use for human consumption. And for this, the period we take it to be 20 years. And in addition, we have also included foods that are chemically identical to naturally occurring substances, but also produced through advances in technology. So by applying this thinking to alternative proteins, we find that some alternative proteins are not considered novel foods. So such as proteins derived from plants that have been used for culinary purposes for a very long time. So for example, Singapore Food Agency has previously considered mung bean-based egg product by Eat Just, and that did not require a safety assessment for the product. But some categories of alternative proteins are certainly regarded as novel foods, like things like cultured meat and foods derived from acellular agriculture would fall into this group. So the most notable example would be the cultured chicken cells, again by Eat Just, the SFA has assessed and allowed to use. So SFA has a regulatory framework to ensure that novel foods is safe for consumption. So for these alternative protein products that are novel foods, we need to assess them for safety before they are allowed to be sold. SFA has put in place a pre-market safety assessment process for novel foods, and companies that intend to sell novel foods should submit a safety assessment for review. We have published a guidance document on the information required for SFA safety assessment, which builds on existing documents such as the FDA's Red Book and EFSA's guidance documents that companies can refer to as well. Right, so this guidance document, we recently updated it just last year. Right, it's in this second version for now. And we know that companies are often doing very different things, so this guidance document is not meant to be prescriptive. And we are really encouraging companies to consult SFA early, even when they are still at the early stage of their product development. But this helps us to build trust and understanding and to facilitate regulatory processes when the company is ready to submit the safety assessment dossier for review. Right, you can actually access the guidance document through this QR code over here. So for the rest of the alternative protein products that are not novel foods, they are still subjected to the requirements under the Singapore food regulations to ensure food safety. So food imported or produced or manufactured for sale in Singapore must definitely comply with the chemical, microbiological, and labeling requirements specified under the Singapore food regulations. So in just briefly, the Singapore food regulations will cover chemical requirements such as permitted food additives, maximum allowable levels of contaminants, certain microbiological requirements and standards for ready-to-eat food, as well as labeling requirements and the use of claims in food products. So in the interest of time, I will not go into the details. It's going to be a very, very long lecture. And also all these details are in the statutes. But I'll just bring your attention to the labeling requirements for alternative proteins. Right, so what I really wanted to point out over here is that alternative protein products will need to have a qualifying term stated clearly in the label. So like for example, you can't pass off cultured meat or plant-based meat as meat from traditional livestock. Right, so it's up to you which it's up to you which qualifying term you want to use, but generally we do not encourage terms that suggest something negative about other products. Things like for example, clean meat. Right, then the general labeling requirements for prepacked foods will also still apply. The requirements for the use of nutrition and health claims will also still apply. All right, so my final slide is just to show you that we actively engage our international counterparts. So we know that novel foods is a very new thing, and really we are therefore keen to engage with our international regulatory counterparts to jointly discuss the regulatory approach to novel foods. So it can also help raise awareness and help regulators align our requirements, and which is trade facilitative. Right, so the opportunities and benefits offered by alternative proteins can be applied to any country. Right, we are also seeking opportunities to regulators to formalize relationships through MOUs, which can pave the way for deeper collaboration, and we are also keen to explore multilateral platforms for further collaboration in this area. Right, so we organized our first regulators forum on novel food in November 2019. Together with Temasek Holdings. So we had the privilege of having representatives from Food Standards Australia, New Zealand, and also China National Center for Food Safety Risk Assessment to share on their approaches for novel foods. We didn't have the chance to organize one last year also due to the COVID-19 situation, but we are hoping to have a second edition towards the end of this year. Right, so for this regulators forum, our industry members are also invited. So yes, if you're interested, please do look out for our invitation later in this year. Right, so before I end off, just let me again emphasize that we do encourage you to reach out to SFA early, and if you have an alternative product that you wish to bring to the market, right? So this is especially important. Right, so because if it's a novel food, you definitely have to do your safety assessments, and SFA's role is to really evaluate the safety assessments. And yep, we'll be setting up an email account for more direct access to your inquiries, but in the meantime, please send your inquiries via our online feedback form. Right, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Cheng, for the insightful presentation. It's great that there are a lot of regulations in place for the safety of those in Singapore in regards to alternative proteins. Do reach out to SFA in the email below, in the link on the screen, if you want to know more. This helps. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. This helps us set the stage for the panel discussion next. I'd like to invite our panelists for the panel discussion to come on. Hon Moon It, Executive Vice President of Turtle Tree, Dr. Ling Kai, CTO and co-founder of Shiok Meats, Surat Vajat, CEO of Eat Just Asia, and our moderator, Dr. Dala Agawas, Program Director of Big Idea Ventures. Dala, please.
Thank you, Cheng, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. And we're surrounded by amazing panelists from multi-million-dollar food tech companies that are really shaping the way that we view alternative proteins and modernizing food today. So I'm sure you're all very curious about what each and everyone does and how they started on this journey. So let's start with Dr. Kai. Could you please share a bit more about Shiok Meats and what the vision and mission of the company is?
Great, thank you, Dalal, and thank you for inviting me here today. I'm happy to share about myself and Shiok Meats. I'm Kai, the CTO, co-founder of Shiok Meats. We're a cell-based seafood company based in Singapore. And we started almost 3 years ago by myself and Sandhya, our CEO. Our interest is in crustaceans, so we work on shrimp, crab, and lobster. Right now, we're still in the R&D stage, and we're working hard to commercialize, hopefully by the end of next year or the following year.
Amazing, thank you. And maybe we could have Hon Moon if you'd like to go next.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here. And Dr. Dalal, good morning, and Cheng and everybody. Turtle Tree is a homegrown biotech company specializing in using cell-based technology to produce milk and milk ingredients from the blueprint of human milk. And our researchers are based in Europe and the US and Singapore, of course, and developing the latest cell lines, microbial strains, as well as growth media and scaffolding technology. Now, our mission is to make the highly nutritious ingredients that is found in human milks available to anyone and everyone who needs it in a very affordable as well as sustainable manner.
Exciting. And yes, Saurabh, would love to hear about the journey of Just, and of course, the vision and mission of coming into Singapore.
Sure, thanks. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for dialing in early in the morning. So for Just, what we are trying to essentially achieve is we're trying to challenge two of the most basic underlying assumptions in the food world today. One, the first one, is that we need to get the chicken eggs from a poultry farm. So we are trying to change that thought process by making eggs in a plant-based format. We have already started selling in the US. We have been selling now for almost 2 years. We have also been selling in various parts of Asia and have been getting a great response. So that's the first underlying assumption which we are trying to challenge. The second one is to enjoy your meats. You need to kill animals. So we at Just have developed the world's first regulatory approved cultured chicken product for commercial sale, which coincidentally happened in Singapore, and we started sales towards end of last year. So when we make our chicken products, we are not really killing animals. Well, it's still chicken to eat, but you aren't really killing animals. So these are the two basic underlying assumptions which we are trying to challenge. Of course, as we try to achieve this, we are trying to also make the broken food systems a lot better. Some of the zoonotic disease outbreaks which we have seen over the last 2 odd decades, with the latest one being COVID-19, could have potentially been avoided if the food systems were not really broken. So by trying to move away from the conventional wet markets and some of the inefficient and non-safe ways of handling food towards these new and novel ways, we're trying to also make that change.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So I'm really curious, I guess it's a question for everyone on the panel is, why would you start a food tech firm in Singapore? And what are the factors that made you to decide that, here, in this sort of corner of the world? So yeah, maybe Dr. Kai, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. I mean, for us, why we started in Singapore is we're based here. I was trained here in Singapore, and that's where I met Sandhya as well. And one of the things that we were really excited about to do in Singapore is that we have a great talent pool of people here who are trained in the stem cells, biotech area, food tech as well. And for us, it's very relevant to build the cell-based technology in Singapore because of a few important reasons. One of it being that we don't have many natural resources in Singapore, so it's difficult, and we don't have space to build a lot of farms to grow our crustaceans in Singapore. So that's one. The other part of it is that, the traceability of it, because in Singapore, we're so used to having our food being imported into Singapore. I actually never grew up thinking much about where my food comes from. So we're really excited to be able to use the cell-based technology to be able to, increase food security in Singapore, and also allow us to know where our food really comes from when we make it with our systems in Singapore.
Yeah, who'd like to go next?
I'll go, Dr. Dalal. Well, our founders, many of you have met Feng Ru, is a Singaporean. Despite a lot of other temptations, we are still a homegrown Singapore company. But from a business perspective, Singapore is the perfect place where technology and business all converges. And it has a top-notch education system, very efficient government, world-class infrastructure. And I think when it comes to food, I myself personally is involved in food and agriculture from a very, very early days, food security, food safety, and so on. So I have a certain bias. This government support, the 30 by 30, the Singapore food story, and when you have food security as a national initiative, and this is, I believe, the second national initiative after the water story that we have. The government is very determined to make it happen. And I think in food and agriculture, which I started 6 years ago, it is very important to have the government support and the regulatory support to make the business happen. So Singapore is a no-brainer.
Yes, Rob, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So for us, the company was founded in the US. However, about 3-4 years back, while we were evaluating how to go about growing the company, we hired external consultants, which did a cost analysis for us, which did a detailed analysis amongst the various competing options that we had in terms of where we should be setting up our base. And while we were doing that analysis, we looked at Singapore as one of the 4 or 5 different options which we evaluated. It seemed that on most of the metrics which we had selected, Singapore was either the best alternative or maybe the second best. And hence we decided that it makes more sense to be in Singapore. Some of these metrics were respect for IP. We felt that some of the other options which we were looking at could have been potentially slightly lower cost options vis-a-vis Singapore, where cost of doing business might be slightly higher. However, there's significantly more respect for IP, one. Two, we were being able to access the capital market significantly better in Singapore in terms of access to the investor pool. Also, it was easier to tap into the talent network in Singapore. On top of that, we feel that if you have a manufacturing base in Singapore, it's perceived positively across Asia and even globally, vis-a-vis some of the other countries. So let's say if I have to give food to my son and the label on it reads made in Singapore, I would have a positive predisposition vis-a-vis some other geography, especially if I have to give that food to my kids or to the younger ones, to the old elderly within the family. So given each of those hard considerations as well as the softer considerations, we felt that Singapore perhaps stands out and made an easy decision for us. Of course, on top of that, we were getting a lot of support from the various governmental agencies, which Honmun referred to, which made our decision easier.
Yeah, if I may kind of add on to what Saurabh says, is that, as an investor on the site, looking, Saurabh and Eat Just Asia is very very humble. They forgot to mention that the first cell-based meat is approved in Singapore last December, and a lot of effort. And I'm pretty sure the whole Eat Just group, as well as the shareholders for Terra Group, has worked very hard in making that happen. So that was a big win for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess on that note, Saurabh, what was the public, how was the public reception for sort of the debut of cell-based, meat? And, do you see any shifts as well with, in terms of like food tech innovations and, sort of the general perception of cellular agriculture?
Sure. So I think it has been a phenomenal reception. Generally, people in Singapore are willing to try new products. They are more open to newer concepts. Also, we see a lot of the younger sections of the society, the younger population, the SEC, ABC, socioeconomic class ABC, each of those different sections of the society wanting to try these new novel foods. There are people who, for religious reasons, had not really consumed meats. And they come and thank us saying that, hey, this is for the first time in my 40 years, 50 years of my life that I'm eating meat. Some Buddhists, some Hindus. So each of those feedback when we receive make us feel special. It makes us feel that we are doing some of the right things. We are at an inflection point of how food has been consumed over the years. Something similar to what was seen in the mobile phone industry, how it was initially super expensive and then suddenly when technology caught up, today each of us has a mobile phone. Very few would be using a landline. So we feel that with this increasing acceptance, we are coming to a point wherein this inflection will happen very soon.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. And I think, again, as Honmun iterated, it's really paving the way for new companies to also get into the market and, of course, shaping the food industry. So a question to Honmun, I'm very curious, how has the food industry reacted to some of these novel alternative proteins? Are they embracing it? Do you see any backlash? Just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, again, as an investor, we follow where the money is, right? Most recently, I was listening to a podcast. Jim Allen, kind of the godfather in that area, said that there were about $3.1 billion invested in cellular agriculture alone just last year. That's 3 times of what it was the year before. And his company was probably the world's largest fund that invests in this area. 1/3 of it goes to that area. So when you have money putting in this, you will see a lot of innovators going to that area to solve all sorts of problems that they have out there. Now, thanks to Eat Just launching and getting the cell-based chicken approved, a survey that was conducted by both of you actually shows that as much as 70% in the US market, as well as in Singapore, probably as much as 78% are pretty open to trying that. And when it comes to food, it's not like any other product. It's very personal because Asia has a long history in food culture and very entrenched in agricultural practices. So people are very cautious. And when it comes to food, you really got to taste it. When you taste it and realize, wow, I didn't realize this is chicken, And I didn't realize this is actually meat made in a non-traditional way, and it's clean, don't have the animal cruelty in it, and environmentally friendly. Yeah, why not? So the reception has been good, I must say, but I think we are not stopping here, because we need, all of us needs to make sure that we continue educate, we continue work with all the stakeholders, including the regulators, and make sure that we have this in a very open manner, show them what our technology is. What I like a lot is I'm beginning to see very recently a lot of the cell-based protein companies starts simplifying the technology to the consumer. In fact, one of the things I like a lot is like, hey, we go to a microbrewery, our favorite pub, to drink nice cold beer. We love that beer, and we love sitting next to big tanks and seeing their beer coming out. Cellular agriculture or cell-based protein is exactly the same. You see big bioreactors. Instead of beer coming out from that, actually proteins come out from that, and then you start making meat or milk and so on. So I thought that is a good start, and I think that will help positively in consumer acceptance.
Yeah, and on that note, I think, yeah, Dr. Kai, it would be really interesting, I guess, to know a bit more about the key takeaways from that research. And I know that you actively actually do a lot of consumer outreach, educate the masses about cellular agriculture, as well as, seafood practices. So yeah, would you like to elaborate a bit more?
Sure. As Hongmoon mentioned, we did a survey last year specifically for Singapore to understand the local interest in cell-based seafood. And we were really excited that the results were quite similar or even better than some of the other Asia surveys that were done. So we found that in Singapore, 78% of Singaporeans were willing to try cell-based seafood. And interestingly, I think most of their concerns was more of the environment side of things, whereas I personally would have thought it would have come from more of the health side of things. So that was something interesting to us. And similar to what Sarab has seen for Eat Just in their actual commercialization, most of the interests that were positive comes from the younger age group.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, Dr. Kai, based on the discussion that we've been having so far about the food industry, is it crucial for you to collaborate, with traditional, food players, or do you have to go at it solo?
I think for us, we've always been interested to collaborate with other like-minded companies, be it other startups, be it other food companies. I think that's something we've always been keen about, because this is such a young technology. It is quite a lot to do as an individual company, and we don't have the expertise in a lot of the other areas. I mean, some of the reasons why I think it'll be positive and we see a lot more of these announcements this past year of collaborations with food companies is that then you can tap into relationships of ingredient sourcing, how do you distribute your products, and establish customer pipelines. Those are very important things to do. So I think, we are always on the lookout, and both on the research side and on the commercialization side for valued partners to work with. And I think that's something we do see and we'll be seeing more of in the coming years to come.
I resonate with Dr. Kai 100%. If you look at specifically in cellular agriculture technology, plenty of startups, no lack of them. Everybody wants to go asset light. So when you finally have that technology, that strain, that scaffolding and all this, so who is going to help you do the scaling up to push the price down to affordability? Right now, to be very honest, there are very few. We have to approach farmer grades bioreactor CDMO to help us do that. And if you dig deeper, the world's capacity in this area will use up in about 12 to 18 months max. And we will have a big challenge when it comes to having good food grade CDMO to start producing cell-based protein. But like every challenges, there's an opportunity for investors to look at this area. So that's an area a lot of investors are putting in money to prepare for this scaling up, because there is a lot of forecasts. I think the last 6 months, at least 3 different reports from AT Kearney, BCG, as well as RethinkX, forecasting that by the end of this decade, that alternative protein will reach price parity, meaning it will be the same price as the meat that we get from industrial farm or even lower. But for that to happen, a lot of things need to be in place, including good, reliable CDMO. So partnership is super important. And then the last thing is, like, we are selling to the consumer, to the market. We honestly, not many of us startups have the experience in terms of food distributions and manufacturing. So that area, I think partnership is very important. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rob, do you have anything to add as well in terms of Eat Just partnerships in the region?
Sure. So what I think, again, kind of broadly agree with what Kai and Hanmun have been saying. So I think we feel that it's essential for us to partner up with some of the other larger companies. We've been doing those kind of partnerships. We have entered into partnerships in various parts of Asia, as well as in US and Canada, with companies that would be helping us in terms of bottling or packaging of our egg product, and also in distribution. So we feel that while our core strength is to perhaps focus on the research and the production, we could always partner up with companies that would be helpful in helping us move faster and move more efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just curious, I think based on what Hanmun said about, the investment, let's say, trends, or what investors are looking for. So, from I guess your collective experiences, this is a question for all of our panelists. What are the next sort of, food trends that you think are going to emerge and shape the industry within the next, 5 to 10 years? So maybe, Dr. Kai, if you'd like to go first.
I think right now what I see, I have to preface, I'm not a business person, I'm a scientist, so I only know so much about the business side. From what I've seen so far, I mean, I think the alternative proteins are really a very hot area that everybody is very excited to be part of, be it plant-based, be it cell-based, acellular proteins, all of this have been really popular and coming up. And we see a lot of very exciting startups in this area. And I think the supportive technologies to help scale up, be it making the media, making the vessels to grow our cells, those are partners or startups that are also really needed and growing in this area as well.
Yeah. So you would say more of the, let's say, the ancillary and auxiliary services for this emerging technology, like biomaterials, equipment.
Yes.
That's great. Yes, Rob, what do you think?
I think with a significant chunk of the global population, close to about 60% being in Asia, clearly there's a massive demand of food in Asia, and there is a shortfall of availability of food. Hence, Asia is a net importer. Now, each of these alternative protein companies or other new age food companies, not necessarily protein alone, are being able to meet this inherent macro trend. And hence, there would clearly be a focus for investing into this space. Also, if one looks at this space, what's happening, especially in Asia, is that with increasing wealth or increasing income, there's increasing propensity to consume more protein. We have all studied in economics that as the wealth increases, people tend to consume more meats. So we see each of those factors contributing to a growth in the demand for meats, the increase in population, the increasing income levels, and a small chunk of it, still the lion's share would fall with the conventional meat companies, but a small share of that could potentially be fulfilled by each of these companies within the ecosystem, whether that's short meats, that's Kai or Hanmun's Turtle Tree or us. And hence, all of these companies would grow. Also tend to broadly agree with what you said, that this would inherently benefit the allied industries. So let's say on the cultured meat side, people who are present in the creation of the growth mediums. That could be one area of focus. On the plant-based side, there could be some trends that we would observe in terms of companies that were conventionally focused on starch, trying to also now focus on protein. As you might be aware, when you are extracting protein, starch happens to be a byproduct, or the reverse. So conventionally, there were these starch companies for whom protein was a byproduct. Given this increasing demand, the economics are now gradually evolving. So each of these are inherent repercussions or inherent outcomes of some of these changes that we are seeing. To summarize, one, each of these companies, whether it's a Shop Meats or a Turtle Trees or Just, I believe has a great potential, a good future in front of them. Anyone who's allied to our space also inherently would benefit from this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, what we've been seeing as well from Big Idea Ventures side is that, yeah, a lot of companies are emphasizing on, let's say, working on providing solutions to reduce the costs, right? Using like AI, software analytical tools, as well as big data. And we've invested in 2 companies in this sector called Animal Alternative Technologies, as well as Innocent Meat. And I think, yeah, what you mentioned as well about the, let's say, finding ways to create closed loop systems by recycling the media that's used to produce cellular agriculture. And I think, yeah, this is really, really important. I'm excited to see the companies that are going to emerge and focus on these trends. What about you, Honwoon? What are your predictions?
Well, I'm going to leverage on all the things you guys have said and kind of put it together. I think, Dr. Dalal, you hit it very right. I come from a tech background, engineer by training. So when I saw how AI, big data, machine learning helps, develop to a stage where it becomes affordable, that's where it's only stage 1. Stage 2 is actually application, and we're beginning to benefit from this application, including the food part of it. If you look at it, it's all there's the fingerprints of these happening. So for me, along the same line, I think precision fermentation is going to be one of those foundation that is going to fundamentally change, and that will be the trend. Now, at a micro level, looking at Turtle Tree, for example, we are going to be able to produce human ingredients or the nutritious ingredients in human milk from the blueprint of human milk itself, and then apply them to all the foods that we eat, which goes back to a market called what I would say called precision nutrition, meaning right now, for example, we all know that human breast milk is best for babies, but one sector that we could start is mothers may not be able to provide those goodness and nutritious milk for the babies. Then with this product, we could actually enhance the existing infant formula milk, although it is not as good as the human milk itself, but it is close to as much as possible. And taking things like lactoferrin, which is what we are focusing on, alpha lactoalbumin and HMOs, we could actually apply this to adult nutrition, sports nutrition, and across all the food that we eat. And then at the plant-based side of it, as you know, I probably invested quite a bit of them. We're now looking at what happens when consolidation starts coming in. And then you start looking at, hey, can we take the results from machine learning, AI, and data analytics in the gut microbiome space? We know microbes helps in humans' health, and then basically use that knowledge, put it in a plant-based meat and said, okay, this plant-based protein or this plant-based milk is good for treating high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and so on. See, I think the trend will be there. It's more of application. And on a bigger trend, I'm a firm believer that in end of this decade, maybe 15 years, not 10 years, it will reach price parity, and more than half of the protein that we eat will be from plant-based and alternative and cell-based meat.
Amazing. All right, so we have a lot of great questions. Thank you, attendees, for sending them over. So yeah, these questions are not addressed to any particular panelists. So feel free to unmute if you'd like to answer it. So the first question is from Grace. So Grace is asking, given that manufacturing costs are higher and limited production space in Singapore, what are some of the challenges in the manufacturing process for alternative proteins currently to be able to achieve scale and be cost effective in the market? Anyone like to take it?
I think I can give it a shot to start. I think with most of the cell-based companies, we really do have to build our own infrastructure. So that's very expensive. And as Hong Moon mentioned, a lot of these are pharmaceutical grade, and we have to tap into what is currently in high demand for vaccination production. So it takes a very long timeline to get and cost to be able to build our own space. I think how to make it cost effective will come with scales of economy as we continue to scale and be able to produce in larger and larger volumes. The ingredients we get and the amount we produce will become more and more affordable. And I think that will happen probably in the next decade or so. And I think, you know, Singapore is expensive, but thankfully with a lot of our production, we're not as labor intensive. A lot of this can be automated. We just need a few skilled labor engineers to maintain our manufacturing plants and keep it going. So in terms of that, most of the cost will come from the equipment and setting up the space. And I think, you know, if there are more initiatives or support from the government in terms of the space and, you know, helping us get more affordable spaces to set up our manufacturing plants, that will definitely help a lot.
You know, if you have been following me, you know I'm a big fan of precision fermentation, right? So my dream is maybe not in a decade, maybe in 2 decades or 3 decades. We will have, just like brewery at home, that you can brew your own beer. We'll be having this little bioreactor that we can actually make our own chicken, our own pork, or our own milk. And that is free from animal, free from antibiotics and hormones, and, you know, do it the way that we want it to be.
Maybe I would like to share our perspective from the Just's experience. So interestingly, we are trying to build our largest plant in Singapore. Now, for this particular plant, what we have observed is that the lion's share of the total cost is on the equipment side of things. Now, whether I install those equipment in Singapore or in any other part of the world, the equipment cost essentially remains the same. Yes, the land costs are slightly higher in Singapore, but maybe that's the cost of doing business, especially when you want a better protection for your IP and a higher value for the products that you're selling. So there isn't really a significant difference in terms of any of the other cost heads. And this is contrary to popular perception, where people believe that Singapore would be significantly more expensive. The only cost element where we feel Singapore is slightly more expensive is on the labor front. And as Kai mentioned, we are trying to build a plant which does not really require a lot of labor. So even that is broadly minimized. So I would think that it's not really fully accurate to go with the conventional assumption that Singapore is more expensive, especially for these high-end, new age food companies.
Yeah, great answers. Okay, we have another question from Tanya Go. So this is, I guess what she wants to understand is, you know, for the companies that are from Singapore, so Shock Meats and Turtle Tree, you know, what is necessary for you to expand overseas from Singapore? So what kind of support, you know, from either the government, what kind of support from the government can be provided? And to kind of follow up on that, she'd like to hear from Sarab in the sense of what kind of government support and mindset was necessary to, you know, encourage you to move to Singapore. So yeah, anyone can start.
I think for us, we are keen to first launch and commercialize in Singapore. There's actually not much, I mean, we can move to overseas at any point of time, but because we have grown here and we have a good group and facility set up here, that's our main interest. Moving overseas, we've actually received a lot of help from Enterprise Singapore to get partners, potential, you know, places to expand into. I think Enterprise Singapore has colleagues or groups stationed in various countries that can help us expand into the different countries of interest. So that's very helpful. And yeah, I think that's probably, for us, we are planning to first launch in Singapore. And once we have the system set up and we have the approvals done in Singapore, then we'll look in other APAC regions to expand into.
So I'll go next. I must say the Singapore government, especially the agencies, ESG, EDB, SFA, A-Star, they have done tremendous good work in supporting the community, including us, and we benefit from that. In fact, when we announced just a few months ago that we're setting up our international R&D center in the US, it wouldn't be possible if not because of the good work they have done and made Turtle-Free known in the international community as well as in this space. So continue to do that good work. And of course, I think SFA being very forward-looking, the first in the world to approve cell-based protein, we would work very closely with them to hopefully get the approval for our cell-based milk ingredients as well before we launch it overseas. So these are the areas.
Sure. Maybe I go last on Tanya's question. So as far as Just is concerned, like I was mentioning earlier, we did a very comprehensive analysis by hiring 2 external consultants, which helped us think through the costs, and it was a pure economic decision from our perspective of selecting Singapore, again, vis-a-vis any other geography that we had considered. Of course, the strategic geographical location makes it easier because we use mung beans as a raw ingredient, and a significant chunk of mung beans are grown in Southeast Asia where it is a native crop. So that made it slightly easier. In terms of other things or the kind of government support, I think the government has been backing us all through. In particular, EDB has been exceptionally helpful for Eat Just. It sometimes becomes slightly difficult as an external company to figure out which agency to speak with. There are just so many agencies. Thankfully for us, EDB was the nodal point of contact, which would do all the work for us, whether it was with an SFA or a JTC, or maybe not SFA, but maybe with a JTC or A-Star or whichever agency or NEA. For each of those agencies, we could centrally get everything done with by speaking with the EDB folks. So I think EDB has played a phenomenal role in making this an easy decision for us. The decision for us was made about 2 years back. Between then and now, things that had been communicated by EDB, they have under-promised, over-delivered. They have gone way beyond what was communicated. So a lot of effort and a lot of credit for whatever we are doing should in fact be translated or should be given to EDB team, I would say.
Yeah, I like to add on to that as well. As somebody who has lived overseas for many, many years and looking at how difficult it is just to get certain things done, I think the biggest problem in Singapore is there's so much support, so many different grants and schemes, you really don't know which one to go. You got an avalanche of this thing. So that's a good problem that you have, if you may call it a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great privilege to be a food tech startup here in Singapore. Okay, our next question is from Andrew Powell. So Andrew is asking, based on the complexity of food security, which can be resolved into 4 dimensions, which is 1, availability, 2, physical access, 3, economic access, and then 4th, utilization. So he'd like to understand from each of the panelists, which dimensions are you currently addressing with your technology to enhance food security?
Each of those 4, maybe I go first. So I would say each of those 4 that he has highlighted are being directly or indirectly being addressed. If I talk about Eat Just, in particular, for us, the raw material, as I mentioned, is mung bean or the green bean, which is grown a massive quantum grows in Asia. Most of it grows in Asia. So there's availability in terms of raw material. On the other end of the spectrum, there is for creating availability of our end product. We are tying up with a host of companies that are helping us with distribution, right from US to China. So that takes care of availability both on the raw material end of the spectrum and the finished goods. On the physical access, again, there is effort that is going in terms of the economics. Of course, as with any technology, as the volumes go up, as it becomes more easily available, I think the economics would start making sense. We believe that unless it is affordable, it would not really become a mass product. As C.K. Prahlad said or spoke about the wealth at the bottom of the pyramid. So we feel that to actually make an impact, we need to be widespread. We can't really be focused on a very niche, very small segment of the society. And hence it's important that the economic access is such, the costing is such. And to achieve that, the utilization rates need to go up, the efficiencies need to go up. So on each of those four, directly or indirectly, we are working. And I would assume it would be something similar, maybe in different ways, but essentially similar outcomes that others are also doing. Kai?
Yeah, I think, Sarah, I think we are also working on all four dimensions, but probably more emphasis on the first two to start, since we're still building the technology and scaling it up on the availability and physical access. And as Sarah mentioned, until we are able to scale it to a certain point, the costs will still be high for the first few years that we're still working on it. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, same here. We and Syok Meats are in the same stage. We're still a startup, and we haven't reached the commercialization stage yet. But in all these four dimensions, we're definitely directly looking at it, and indirectly, and the last two. So now we want to be focused. Resources are limited as well, so making the availability and physical access, and that's our priority.
Yeah. Okay, the next question, I know we have probably room for one more question, is from Amy Rabang. So she's asking, the success of FoodTech boils down on whether the consumer, sorry, where did it go? Whether the consumer will support these products. So what are your plans to push alternative food sources into the mainstream market?
I can go. To me, I think it's a great question. Very, very important to us. To us is educate, engage the consumer as early as possible. Be very open about our technology. How do we do it? It's okay to say we don't know. It's also okay to say, okay, we'll fix that. And I think it's very important in the early stage, before all these mainstream fearmonger and all these things start setting in. I think that's super important to us.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kai, go ahead.
Okay, sure. I think for us, it's a similar thing that we're working very hard on. Consumer education. It's important, doing the surveys to understand what motivates the early adopters, what is their key interests, and sharing what we know about our process is really important. And I think the other part that is also important is to kind of tailor our products for each of the markets we're looking at. Since our focus is on Asia Pacific, we tend to focus more on Asia friendly dishes.
For us, maybe because we are at a different stage of evolution, I feel that there's already a significant demand that comes in, but of course we would want that to go up. We feel that an important part of the demand comes from the education that maybe Honmun was referring to. So let's say, for example, our egg product currently contains 0 cholesterol and slightly more protein than the conventional egg. So when people come to know of some of these nutritional benefits, it makes them want to try. As costs come down, people want to try. Because there's greater availability, which was one of the earlier questions around the 4 dimensions. People want to try. So by creating this enabling ecosystem around each of these elements, we believe that people would want to try. It's being focused on ensuring that we are making the right product consistently, the same quality each and every time that a consumer wants to experience it. So that's the core of it. Of course, there are a lot of enabling factors that are at play over here. So let's say if a celebrity consumes the product, or if somebody puts a tweet, somebody puts an Insta post, each of those things help create awareness. especially when a new restaurant starts selling our product, when any of the famous global chains like Tyco's in China started selling our product, that creates a lot of good and positive word of mouth. So each of those are enabling factors as well that work in the background.
All right, I think we're just out of time. So I would really love to thank all of our amazing superstar panelists for engaging with us today and sharing their insights and advances with their technologies and how they're shaping the future of food. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks you.
Thank you so much,
Thanks for coming.
Kai, Surat, and Dala for the great insights and the moderation, and Cheng for the great presentation earlier on. And of course, we cannot forget our attendees for being a very interactive audience today and bringing in a lot of questions for us. So if you'd like to revisit the conversation, we'll be sending a post-event email with the recording to the session and also ways to connect with our speakers through their LinkedIn. We have a lot of upcoming events, both at General Assembly as well as SGInnovate. So we do hope to see you at future events. So have a good rest of the week and we hope to see you again. Bye-bye.